Hello and welcome to Freedom from Trauma, an online education series where we're bringing you experts, teachers, and authors with powerful conversations and profound practices that help heal trauma and consciously create the body, mind, spirit that you truly desire. Today, it's my absolute honor to introduce our special guest, Alfred White. Alfred, welcome to Freedom from Trauma and to this series. It's such a pleasure and honor to have you here. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Alfred, you have had a tremendous journey, a tremendous life journey that's been riddled with trauma right from the time that you were a young boy. To start us off, would you take us into that journey and what you experienced as a boy growing up, as a child in your family?
Yeah, that's a heavy, interesting question, that you ask like that, because there's always two sides and reflections of this coin. I actually grew up within adverse babyhood experiences in an adverse childhood environment. So therefore I had adverse childhood experiences growing up. And so as far back as I can remember, and I say that's around when I was 5 years old, I was staying with my mother in Harley Park in the projects because I bounced between my grandparents' house and my mom's house on weekends because I had a brother that's 18 months younger than me. And so she watched him, and my grandmother and grandfather took care of me during the weekdays. But when I went over there to stay one weekend, and I was around 5 years old, me and my brother was taking a bath together in the bathtub. And I heard this noise out there, a loud noise. And so it scared us. And so, but I got out the tub and went out there to go look to see what was happening. And as I walked out, wringing wet and naked as a little kid, and seeing this guy exiting the door, and my mom was laying on the floor, and her head was busted open. She was bleeding. She was knocked out. He had hit her in the head with a Thunderbird bottle. And then that ended up being the guy that she married. So that should pretty much tell you what my life was about, as a child, Then so there was always verbal and physical abuse and just everything that you can imagine for a individual at that age, 5, 6, 7, and 8 years old. And this kept on going on. There was the critical verbal abuse. There was the beatings, there was just, the food resources wasn't good. There was no variety, we was eating cans. I don't know if you remember back in the days when they had government cheese, and so there wasn't no food stamp. So you had to go to get all your staples and stuff. So there was powdered milk, peanut butter in the can, and just some crazy stuff, and salmon. So having to eat that type of diet, we never had cereal in the box. It always came in long plastic bags, you know what I'm saying? And so that's nutritional adverse childhood experiences, and then, at the age of 13, I just couldn't take it anymore. I ran away from home because my stepfather, he was a Korean war vet, and I guess he was some kind of hero, but he wasn't no hero to me because he would go and gamble the money and drink up the money. And then on weekends, after he went and gambled his money off, then, he would come home and pull shotguns and pistols and march us out of our bedrooms and holler and scream and make us come out the rooms and stuff and wake us up in the middle of the night. It was like, playing Russian roulette, you know what I mean? And keep adding chambers to the gun every weekend, and then having to go fishing. And then when he would take us to church on Sunday mornings, he'd be flying down Martin Luther King up here doing 100 miles an hour. And then the light would change. And then he would slide into the intersection. And then half pints of alcohol bottles would be hitting us in the back of our shoes, sliding out from underneath the seats and stuff, and so this has got to be just way too much, and we didn't have any kind of social or emotional life. There was no nurturing. You follow what I'm saying? No nurturing. But there was not even acknowledgement that I was a child. You know, there was no affection. You know, it was just like I was here. I never heard I love you. I never got a hug. It was always, you know, it was him first, you know, and then I was the oldest, so I looked like my dad, and he was a no good such and such. So there was transference there, you know what I mean? So there was no spirit, there was no connection, and then, you know, getting beaten with brooms, you know what I'm saying, and ironing cords, you know, and extension cords and switches, and then getting socked in the mouth, and there was no cultural, there was no emotional, there was no social, any of that type of nurturing. I didn't know nothing about nothing. You know, if I didn't hear it or overhear it, you know, you go to other people's house and then you get in the car, they would slap you in the mouth or looking grown people in the mouth. You're not supposed to do this. Well, you got it sitting in the living room. What else are we supposed to be looking at? You know what I mean? You know, your evil eye and stuff, you know what I mean? And doing all them old gang signs that you're going to get a whooping or get socked in the mouth when you get back in the car. So I was tired of being terrorized and traumatized, you know. And then, you know, there was just no support with homework, you know what I mean? Just make sure that you have the house clean. And I got tired of thinking that that's all I was a maid or somebody else's assistant, you know. So they took all that frustration out on me, you know, as a child. And so, you know, and I really didn't, there's a lot of anger in me and a lot of confusion in me. And I didn't know what it was to even be a human being or the context or anything that I was even living in. If it wasn't for my step grandmother, who kind of oversaw me during the period, I think from 3 to 5, because during my first 3 years, it's apparent that I was traumatized because I knew that I was in the hospital. And so some people said it was polio, but you know, it's like I lived with my parents like the mafia. They would never talk about what's really going on, you know, with you in the room, you know, so like it was a secret. But my step grandmother told me that my father would eat all the food and put the empty cartons back in the refrigerator. You know, so when they came over and looked in the refrigerator, it would look like there's food in there because my grandfather was a longshoreman, so he had some money. But it's a whole different thing about being born and being raised in America. And so, you know, this is a really, really good opportunity because we can't keep telling people they need treatment. You know, what we need is nurturing. What we need is the correct information. We can't even say that we need education because it's not even education. It's just the simplest form of the analogy, you know, and so give us the information and then we'll know if it's education or not. But don't give us biased information because we're not of the same financial caste or class as you. And so that's where you see all this stuff. And so the elephant in the room for today with trauma is science. It's not evidence-based practices. It's science and evidence-based practices. And so that's where the ACE study comes in. That's where the adverse babyhood experiences study comes in. And then you look at neuroscience, you look at epigenetics, and then you look at the ACE study, and then you look at resiliency. So we have a country now that's only this way because of deprivation, and the deprivation starts with livable wages. And so because we don't have livable wages, children grow up being abused and growing up with adverse childhood experiences. And so the outcomes for people of color is the same outcomes it is for COVID-19. Our bodies aren't prepared enough neurobiologically because we didn't get the right information to handle the onslaught of events that's going on. And so, you know, Dr. Joy DeGruy created a book called The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And so in essence, that post-traumatic slave syndrome is the one that adversity altered our DNA. It's the first step in altering our DNA in allowing epigenetics to come into our lives. So the epigenetics means that we thought that our genes was etched in stone, but they're not etched in stones. It's the environment that can change it. And so therefore that alters your DNA because there's so much pressure from toxic stress pressing down on your body that because you don't have the correct information about nurturing, about nurturing your nature, you know what I mean? And therefore you're lost. So that's the reason why we at the League of Extraordinary People use the trauma-informed care trauma-informed approach for care guiding principles, because that includes safety, because we don't have no discernment about nothing that we do. We don't have any cultural influences. And so it's almost like planting a tree without roots, you know what I mean? And so every time you plant a tree without roots, well, how do you think it's going to directly go whichever way you're pointing it? So we've been classically conditioned, is what I found out through all my education now and all my 40 years being out, living out on the streets, trying to learn how to self-regulate. We don't have mental health problems, you guys. It's self-regulation problems, and we have problems with labels that enforce stigmas that preoccupy a person's mind on some stuff they ain't got no business being preoccupied with, because we're all mammals, we're all species, we're all animals of a different nature, type, and shape and form, and we're just lucky and fortunate enough to have our five senses and the art of communication so we can articulate what's going on, but not unless we take this to the educational level and platform like the way the League of Extraordinary People wants to do in the community's lives. We'll never be able to do this. We don't need any more treatment programs. We need residential centers of excellence. Residential centers of excellence that's going to work on your emotional sobriety. Why? So we can learn about our spiritual growth. You know what I mean? We're more than just a box, and so what Dave actually did is if you ever read the book by Don Miguel Ruiz, Four Agreements, and he talks about the domestication and the dream of the planet. And in the beginning, John Lennon has a quote in there that says that living is easy, misunderstanding all you see. And so that's what's going on. The living looks easy because we misunderstand all we see because we're too busy looking at things on TV that has no life, weight, shape, or form. And it probably takes 30 people to write 30 minutes worth of script, that at the end of the day gets X amount of dollars. But we've been held hostage through our social justice systems, through our healthcare systems, and through our educational platforms. So in essence, we don't need another treatment program. People don't need to go to another group. What we need is a better educational and social justice and healthcare platforms, because that's where this truly comes from. If our healthcare was on point, and we were seeing functional medicine doctors, and we were seeing healers, we were seeing lived experience people like myself who now are mental health, or they call it mental health, and they call it substance use disorder, but I just call it a dysregulation of information myself to my brothers and sisters, because we're all one. You know what I mean? If we walk upright and talk and chew gum at the same time, we're all one. We just happen to be a different flavor, what I mean? And so to discriminate us because we're the different flavor, and we got the same hand, come on now. Then that's where you see that capitalism is at stake here instead of culturalism.
So with your organization, I know the League of Extraordinary People that you founded, I know that it's a platform that you are bringing to people to educate and to help with emotional sobriety practices and regulation. But going back to your own experience, what were the impacts of your childhood trauma on your physical body, physical and health? Like, how did it manifest?
So that went into me self-medicating. So I don't even anoint this with the word that I started my addiction at that time. You know what I mean? Because that's what the world wants me to see it as that I failed. And so it's my addiction. No, that was the underlay for the overplay, for the setup that caused me to want to start self-regulating, because I had never had none of that stuff done from my mom. And so that's called bonding. Those are those areas between the ages of 1 to 3, and I got some notes down here on this, is that we're focused on our right brain thinking, you know, and our right brain is where all our senses are at. And so in actuality, that's our impulsive and compulsive sides of our lives. And so what we fail to understand is the developmental stages that we go through during adolescence. And so our moms and dads didn't know, the people on TV didn't know, the people in school wouldn't teach you, you know, because the people that was in charge of them thought we didn't need to know. But that's the underlay for the overplay. So if you don't know what's underneath the hood, how are you going to know how to run the car? You know what I mean? And nobody gave you a manual, you know what I mean, to tell you how the car operates and what would you do to the car that you have today. You'd be in the shop more often and everything, you know, because see, we wasn't even told that we needed certain fluids and that we need a windshield wiper thing. And then we needed some different water for the radiator. And then we needed some oil, but no, then we need transmission fluid. And then we need some stuff to go in the gas. You know what I mean? Stop buying AM, PM gas when you're driving an automobile that needs Chevron with Tetron. You dig what I'm saying? Yeah. So, you know, they left out some of the most important parts, especially if you ain't privileged. Well, if you ain't privileged, well, you don't need to know about that. You know what I'm saying? And so they condescend you from in the beginning before you even got here in your mother's womb, you know, because in preconception, she doesn't even know how to pick out a man because she's so busy watching TV because her mom and her dad, they might have been separated, you know what I mean? And so nobody's taking care of nobody. So now guess who's in control? Chaos is in control. And so when chaos is in control, then the city is set up. And so we have these adverse community environments called poverty, discrimination, community disruption, you know, lack of opportunity and economic success, you know, so that look how that influences your life. You know, and then look at the cost of housing, the cost of food. And then nobody told us that we needed to eat food that was alive in order to stay alive, right? Mm-hmm. So they kept feeding us stuff in cans and packages and stuff that don't even augment the birth of life in us. And so we're living off of second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth hand information that's not giving us and providing you what the nurturing that God so did when he stepped into this world. Because today I have a spiritual life and it's very important in my life, and I don't start my day out without the spirit. And so I got a lot of my main piece of recovery I got at a faith-based behavior modification program, and it was 9 months, but I actually stayed 2 years there. You know, and so I start my day out with the Word of God. And so Dr. Charles Stanley's In Touch app, and he has his daily devotion, his daily radio show. It keeps me in good, orderly direction. Did you hear what I said? The acronym for God, you know, those words keep me in good, orderly direction. And there I'm learning how to embrace the fruits of the Spirit. The love, the grace, the mercy, the peace, and understand what that means in accordance with how I was made. Because now I don't believe the story that I was told and it's been passed down through time. I look at science and the statistics and the evidence and the research and the studies. And so the League of Extraordinary People is all about these studies, and it hinges on adverse childhood experiences, which was developed in between 1995 in 1997. And we're just now hearing about it in 2020. And it's been being heard about this for quite some time, but nobody wants to embrace it. But every day somebody's going crazier and crazier. It's not because of what's happening today. It's because what happened between the ages of 1 to 3. That's when 90% of our brains are developed, between the ages of 1 to 3. 90%. So the other 10% doesn't get fully developed until we're 25 years old. So did I answer your question?
Yeah. I asked how it impacted your health.
And so really now as an adult, I have liver cancer, I have fibromyalgia, I have irritable bowel disease, and I have the chronic fatigue system. I have TBI, and then also too, I have urges or, you know, a lot of PTSD and complex PTSD. And so that's how it has impacted my health. But I think that it also impacted my health in telling me how resilient I am and how
Right.
fearlessly and wonderfully made that I am. And that, you know, if I listened to man, I wouldn't have got here, you guys. Just real simple. I wouldn't have got here if I listened to man. It's only through acknowledging the spirit that's within me have I been able to overcome all this stuff, because, you know, we keep wanting and looking for man. Well, it needs to be perfect. And, you know, is that perfection? And perfection already happened. And that was the day we was born. It doesn't get no better than that, because to be born, you know, for somebody to bring us all this into a life form, and we can talk and articulate and recognize colors and see nature and walk in nature, that's perfection. Anything that man has said to me, I found that flawed. But anything that the spirit tells me, I just find it beautiful and wonderful.
That's amazing. Because I watched your presentation about a month or so ago on the ACEs, on the ACEs, they were doing a program, and you were there, you were giving a presentation, and you talked about, what it is to be a person of color and have ACEs with being a person of color. And in fact, I ordered the book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, right after that talk. It's actually sitting right here. And it's just incredible, incredible. And then I remember that opening paragraph where they say how they greet each other.
Right, right. And
And
how are
how
the
they say,
children?
how are the children?
Right.
I actually, I'm also a teacher. I teach at a high school, and I actually photocopied that page, and I made 50 copies. I gave it to every teacher at the school, and many of them came back and said, thank you for that. That was really important. I think the perspective of, not just doing the nurture piece, and of what do children really need, and are the children well, how are the children? I think that is so important. So yes, speaking of not just the health challenges and the impact of the health, but the fact that you had and you have the resiliency, that's a big part of the thing that you talk about on your platform, as well as with the organization, and that's been a big part of your work.
That's huge, though. So here's something that we were talking beforehand, and we was talking about our daily rituals, you know. So when I shared about Dr. Charles Stanley, that's part of my daily ritual, you know, because so this program that I want people to understand is a continuum of care program. So when people go to addiction hospitals and stuff of that nature, you know what I mean, and they go in and they say you're going in there for treatment. And I asked them, so what are we treating? You know, I just being a devil's advocate, I would ask the client, so what are we treating? And they would look at me like, what do you know, my addiction. I said, man, that's not what's going on here. That's the underlay for the overplay. I said, what we're really working on is your emotional sobriety. And I said, you know, so unless you're doing some homework and really looking at your fears and your strengths and your needs and your wants, then we'll be here all day. And so I'm only asking you one small thing, one small step for mankind, and that's to be honest. You know what I mean? Just real simple, dude. Just be honest. You know, if you don't know how to do something, just say it, but don't let your pride or ego answer the question. That's the wrong guys. You know what I mean? Because what are you going to cite? What's your research that answer? What's your answers research? What research? Talk to me about that. You know, so I spent 40 years in the streets. You know, and so I was the last guy in the Superman video. You know what I mean? I swallowed a quarter ounce of crack cocaine and died and was paralyzed, and that was only 9 days out of prison. I was only on the street for 9 days, and so how I got to prison at the age of 49 was just remarkable in itself, because I had never been in prison before. I'd been to a lot of them little places, a honeycomb hideouts, you know what I mean? But I didn't really understand why, you know, what was going on, you know, but I had defects of character because I never got to learn about character. When I was growing up, there was no nurturing going on for the nature that was in me, you know what I mean? Because the stepfather was too busy sucking up all the air in the room. You know what I mean? My mom didn't know nothing about science. So that's the reason why. So when you go to school, especially blacks and people of color, you know, you have problem with math and science, you know what I mean? Because there's so much chaos going on at home that when you're wired in life, well, it's just on fire, you know what I mean? Because there's no peace at home. There's no grace, there's no mercy. Everybody's fighting, you know what I mean? And then next thing you know, the air is fighting with each other. You know what I mean? It's the atmosphere in your home. You can just come down, smell it in the air, you know what I mean? Oh God, man, it's one of these, you know what I mean? Let's tiptoe through the tulips, you know, to try to get out the door type thing, you know? And so that's the reason why I am like I am today. But I realize today how joyfully and wonderfully made that I am. That sustains me today. So when you talk about this conversation, I can talk about this for days, but we need to change how we do everything. We just need to change one thing, and that's everything. And we need to start. Now, how are you going to charge somebody? This is a deal here. How are you going to charge somebody to live? Because that's what treatment is. You know what I mean? That's what treatment is. So you didn't get the appropriate program at home because the environment wouldn't let your people get that appropriate money so you can get the appropriate program because now because you got a different flavor on your hands, now they want to pay you in a different increment of money and tell you need to live in a different environment. And so in actuality, your environment is close to where the old garbage dump was, or it's either built on top of the garbage dump, you know, and so you know, we're not our grandparents' 1937 Chevy. You dig what I'm saying? Right. So they don't understand when they was doing all this, how science or toxins would even interact with the body because they didn't know what the endocrine system is all about. They don't know anything about the science of the heart. You know, when they go in the building, they're not consulting any scientists. They're not telling us that all the stuff that we sent China that was all garbage and all that toxins and stuff that they was going to turn it right back and sell it back to us. And so now it's doubly that toxin seeping out of it. You know what I mean? They don't even want our plastic no more. And now that they done took all our plastic and our bubble gum and our bubble wrap and everything and want to wrap it up and sell it back to us in some type of TV stand or something type of furniture or some of that stuff. So by me finding out that I had cancer is how I found out how to live. And so when I was diagnosed with liver cancer and told that I was going to need a liver transplant in 2018, and all I had was me and my dog, Bella, and I had been had her since 2011 and 2012. She's 9 or 10 years old. It was just me and her and God. You know, you can't talk to anybody, you know, that about this. And then when I realized that I needed a second opinion was when I went to the doctor's office and realized that she hadn't even read none of my notes prior to me even coming in. So hadn't I even learned through treatment, you know, and then I don't even want to call it treatment. I want to say a software update, you know, because that's what I equated it to, you know, that I got a software update because I didn't need the burden of knowing that I went to treatment. It makes me seem like I was a bad piece from the beginning. No. It was the nurturing, it was the environment, it was the people that I was hanging around. It was the most toxic people, and that was my family, you know, and it's not because they was toxic, it's just because they never knew because of the color of their skin, nobody decided to tell them, you know, so it's just like in that Brandon Jones piece from God, African trauma piece that he has, and he talks about the Monahan report. In the Monahan report, he was a Secretary of Labor during the Johnson administration. And so he said that there was nothing wrong with the black man. It's just that they needed to be able to learn how to be black men because the system that came in and had created women as the head of households. And so how they did that was between 1968 to 1975, a black man couldn't stay with a black woman if she was on welfare. And so subsequently they took the male out of the home, and they asked to give a woman a job before they would give a man a job. And then also what they did was they stuck in, so they figured that now the black and indigenous and other people of color they need help in raising their families. So they brought in all these different social workers and case managers and teachers and the juvenile jail and the pipeline to prison programs, you know what I mean? And so all these kids, they was never meant to be going to prison. You took their moms and dads out of the home. So now you got kids raising kids and cartoons raising cartoons. You follow what I'm saying? So you look at the homelessness part, that was a plot, that was a planned deal there. Because what happened was Medicaid and Medicare came in and all these nonprofits, and they started taking record amounts of money out of the community. If you go look at some of the local nonprofits and look at how much they take out of the community, you know what I mean? And then you look at how much the police departments take out of the community, and then you look at the social justice and the court programs, what they take out of the community. And then you look at the healthcare programs, take out the community and all nonprofits, and they're not spending any of those resources, and they're creating these healthcare silos that the Black and Indigenous and other people of color don't have. And so that's the reason why we need to start creating our own culturally driven centers of excellence, you know, for healing. And so, and because another deal, the insurance organizations, they're only paying for people who get diagnosis through the DSM, but the DSM isn't the Black and Indigenous and other people of color DSM, you know, and so therefore then when you provide a service to a client, insurance won't reimburse you because it doesn't fit the DSM code that you put in with that. And so that makes it even more difficult. So that's another part of implicit bias, systemic racism, you know what I mean? And just unequalness, you know, and I hate to get political with this, but we have to make it to the next level or else we won't have a new level, you know, and that's the reason why they say with every new level, there's a new devil. Well, that's only because there's a level of deprivation here, and that's the information needed so that we can all be created equal. You know, how's this? You know, you got a huddle over here of predominantly European people, and you got a huddle over here, and they're really predominant in their right brain thinking, because in actuality, you guys never been formed into a connection between the left brain and the right brain, and that the left brain, the critical brain or the prefrontal cortex, you know, is activated at the age of 12 and not fully completed until the age of 25. And actuality is activated a little sooner within the female. So they don't even know nothing about that prefrontal cortex, the limbic brain, the HPA axis, you know, nothing about their vagus nerve, their vagal tone, or none of the exercises that's needed to maintain their humanness. Did you hear what I said? To maintain their humanness, you know, just to maintain their mammalian bodies, you know, their species. And so we're lacking all the same information that they as white privileged receive on a daily basis. You know, they have bank accounts. They had bank accounts that started back 400 years ago when they took us into slavery. So we're a race of people that every day we're actually trying to create and develop wealth. And so, you know, in the back of America was built off of our bronze and stuff, and that's where the wealth is. And now they're saying that we can't get no reparation money. How dare you? The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is the biggest scientific evidence-based research available that proves that we deserve reparations, because adversity has impacted our neuroscience, our DNA, and our genogram. And so that has caused our bodies. And so we don't have psychological problems, you guys. We have physiological problems that because of deprivation, it has caused psychological problems in our lives. So the whole deal behind what I wanted to use tonight as my topic is the setup, living with addiction, and what happens to the family when addiction becomes part of it. It's just the underlay for the overplay that's been going on in America for the last 400 years, and it goes on to any and everybody. And I also cite another research and study that you can look up in conjunction to the speech that I'm having this morning, and is that it's the People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. If you look that up on YouTube and look for part 1, you'll realize that this was happening in 1920. It was just right after the 1918 Spanish flu. And so this is how the labor unions and stuff started organizing. So it's almost like it was 100 years ago. And if you look up his story, because I don't even want to say it's history. Did you hear what I said? It's his story, because it's not the anthropologies look on what happened. So when you take an anthropologist and you take a historian and you put them side by side, you know, when you see the stones in the dirt not matching up with what's being said and what's actually happening, then you can really see what's going on here, you know. And so through this conversation that you've created through the summit, it's just really powerful, because that's what the League of Extraordinary People is about. And if you like, I'd like to share a mission or vision with you.
Oh, absolutely. I do want you to share that. Before you do that, just you had said that you have spiritual practices that you have, which are your daily self-care practices. Can you say a little more about what are the other complementary practices that you have used to help you on your path of healing and recovery?
So I do a lot of research. I'm a nerd. Imagine that, you know, a guy from the streets being a nerd, you know what I mean? And so I'm a nerd, and I do a lot of research. And so I focused on researching everything that I'm talking about today. And I started it through science. And so I use mindfulness. I use prayer, sang, deep breathing. I take therapeutic soaps. Yeah, I use Epsom salt and apple cider vinegar, and I do a 30-minute, and I use 35% food grade hydrogen peroxide. But remember, this is an educational lecture, and I don't want anybody to try none of this stuff without professional advice. But I go to a naturopathic store. I plus take 20 different supplements a day. I changed my nutrition. I only eat organic. I don't eat, and I don't eat dairy anymore, you know, and I don't drink soda pops, and I don't buy sugar. I don't do none of that stuff anymore. And so I work on my body, and I work on my vagal tone, because that's the doorway to anxiety and depression. I don't take pills for anything anymore. I take supplements, and I just a whole body focus deal. So the meditation, and then there's Tai Chi and Qigong, you know, and yoga. Those are things that you have to do with your body. And so I'm getting ready to do the stretching, and I do massage and do massage chairs. And so I take a walk every morning with my dog for an hour while I listen to my spiritual awakening. And so that's kind of my meditation, why I get in touch with earth. And so that's part of resiliency, is grounding ourselves, and then learning how to listen to your inner voice, that inner child, your spirit, you know, because before I always did something wrong, there was a small voice, you know, don't do it. Don't you dare do it, Alfred. You know you're going to get hit. You know what I mean? And then, you know, after you're in jail or something, you said, man, I should have listened to that voice. But so I've taken that to another level and really said, Alfred, you know, really, man, by nature, you was born to do right. You was born to be right, you know. And so I said that, I got off track there for a minute.
You were saying you were born to do this.
Well, being right, and that's mean being good. And so all the time in the world is always telling me all these negative things to do. When I really realized and I focused and I stayed at that faith-based Christian behavior modification program for 2 years, then I had enough intimate conversations with Alfred, you know what I mean, about right and wrong. You know, it came apparent to me that we've always was created for goodness and kindness and love and grace and mercy, and that the things that happen to us is because we hesitate and listen to the things of the world. The spirit of the world has been taken, has been proliferated through the social media and through music and through clothes, and then through just if you look at it, change your perspective, just change one thing, just change your perspective. And the reason why everything is failing is because it was created by man. And you look at the reason why everything is growing is because it was created by the power greater than ourselves that we call God. So when you look at that and you look at the lilies of the field and you really realize that in the Bible where it says Solomon could never dress in the splendor that the lilies of the field. And he said that the birds, they don't even worry about what to eat. And so why are you worried? And so the world has created a double-minded man here. And so because what they're doing is drowning out our nature. And our nature is our fullest expressions. And so just like you, I read your bio and your story too, you know, before I even got involved with you, because as I talk, when you've been traumatized, you don't want to do no repeats, and you don't want to work with anybody who's indicative of a repeat, because what we can't do is turn it off in our heads immediately, you know. And so as we look out the window of 1,000 or million different reflections, you know what I mean? We try to, you know, keep some dimmer on that stuff now. So it's all called self-care. It's really called self-care. And so you have to, when you're Black and indigenous and other people of color, if you don't have your own radio, and I mean spiritual radios for your spiritual growth, and know what stations to keep it tuned into, oh, it's going to be a bad video.
Oh, Alfred, wow. So tell us about the League of Extraordinary People now.
Well, so I want to start that out because it just didn't come. I've had some other nonprofits. I bought some houses since I got out of prison, you know, and straightened my whole life around. And then I went and got a master's, and that's a whole nother story. But our mission is to launch an educational and spiritual enrichment revolution to build hope, resilience, and healing through community empowerment. And our vision is to establish a transformational, integrative, and reputable self-healing center of extraordinary people. This residential community model will heal transgenerational trauma through a foundation of safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, peer support, collaboration, and mutuality, empowerment of voice and choice, and purposely elevating historical, ethnic, and cultural legacies. That's really, 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 really important. And our mission is to launch an educational and spiritual enrichment revolution to build hope, resilience, and healing through community empowerment. It's to embrace the community and for each one, reach one, teach one type program. It takes ability to heal or to raise a child. And also, too, we need to reparent our adults. And then that's really important. And that's kind of what I'm doing with myself right now, is reparenting myself. And so that I can forgive my mom. I can forgive my dad, but that doesn't mean I have to have a relationship with him, because he might not be there yet. And he might still be living his old, he was my dad, he wasn't my father. This is the way I look at it. And so I need to be straight with the definition and terms. And so I wouldn't mind addressing that conversation with him, but then he'd need to acknowledge who I am as an individual, not as his son, because I don't take, yeah, you did that part, but you never raised me. And so I think that's only because he was never raised. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't want to be too harsh on him, but I'm willing to have that conversation if he's ever open to having that conversation. It's the same thing with my brothers. We don't have a relationship today, you know. And so when you're ill like this and your core of your being, you know, is calling for family or wanting to have a family, you know, you really realize how important it is that we come together as a unit to create family. And that's the reason why we have 1.5 acres up here in the Seattle, Washington area that we're working towards feverishly with the right support and the right people. And I don't care where you're at, if you want to volunteer to help with the foundational piece of this. We're developing our white paper, and like I said, we have 1.5 acres in this zone that we could create a 6-story mixed-use residential. And so on the bottom of that mixed-use residential, instead of storefronts, it would be the League of Extraordinary People Center of Excellence. And so it would be a trauma-informed care, integrative care with urgent care in it, a trauma-informed life skills school in it, and a trauma-informed life skills. And I just want to say a study curriculum so that we'll learn how to nurture ourselves and learn what our nature is. So we'll be talking about another article that I use as reference is The Science of the Heart by heartmath.org. So we can understand the 4 different ways that our body and our brains communicate, because we have the nervous system, you know, and we have the electromagnetic, we have a endocrine system, you know, pulse. And so we need to know how our brains and our bodies communicate and what type of nutrition it takes for us to eat. And then that we need to have a pH balanced diet, and we need to start eating living foods, you know, in order to supply our living needs, right? And that also too, getting old is not meaning that you're aging. Getting old is just that you've been around for a while. You know, your health doesn't decline when you get old. You know, what declines is us continued living, you know, because we're listening to the dream of the planet, and the dream of the planet is based on the knowledge of the world. And so it's your voice of knowledge. And so that's the information you picked up from Ray, Pookie, and Shaniqua, you know, because what school did you go to? Which science are you supporting here? You know, and so when science and statistics and evidence-based studies are not the foundation of whatever you're speaking out of your mouth, then who's talking? You know, and then who's listening? You follow what I'm saying? And so in the basis of the guiding principles, safety being first, you have to know and understand what are you talking about and what are you saying. And if you don't do like I did. I picked up a dictionary, you know, and so I had to reparent myself. And so you'll be so involved in your own reparenting program that life becomes easier, because then you start learning how to relax, you know, and that means turning the TV off. You'll learn the impact of what 5G is going to do on your body if you listen to it or you hang around it too long. You'll learn the value of what 5G does to your children's brains. You'll learn about the serve and return childhood period when you're 1 to 2 years old. And so what we want to do is take and just recreate an educational platform, a charter school. And so we have a laboratory, okay, there. We have a cafeteria on site there. We have case management on site there. We'll have apprenticeship programs. And so all these things is a whole person-centered approach. And so then we would take and use the Center for Healthcare Strategies Housing First model to create housing for health. And so individuals with complex needs, because I'm an individual with complex needs. I was a high utilizer of public funds. And so that's who they call us. An individual who's a high utilizer of public funds. It means that I went to the emergency rooms and I needed immediate help. And so I was not on a plan because my life was never on a plan. And so, you know, I've been in and out of the honeycomb hideouts, and that's what I call the local jails. You know, before I was 21, I'd been involved in a couple SWAT team entries, you know, where you're in a place and the SWAT team enters the house, you know what I mean, without a knock, you know, and so they come in with the battle rounds. And so, and then before I was 21, I got pistol whipped and robbed. I have 2 holes in my head, you know, and you can see them. And so people, they want to ask you about it or say something, and then you tell them, oh, that was a car accident, you know, and then you try just to avoid all that kind of conversation. But all the time, the TBI and the post-traumatic stress disorders are just flashing red alert. You know, in 1999, my significant other was on that bus that went off the Aurora Bridge, you know, in Seattle. And so she was in a coma. And so we was both addicts, and so and we was living in a motel out on 85th and Aurora in Seattle. They put me on the front page of the newspaper at that time. When I graduated from Seattle Central back in 2006, they put my story on the front page of the newspaper. I didn't too much like the title, but it went AP, it went coast to coast. And you'll look at the words, and it said from a such and such to the dean's list. You know what I mean? So you can imagine what my former life was, you know what I mean? And so I grew up in that era where cats was driving real big cars with real big grills on the front, you know, with eyelashes and eyeballs and boots on the back. And so, you know, it was like, I didn't grow up around lawyers. I grew up around them other guys, you know what I mean? That like long cars and nice suits and big hats, you know? And so that's what I aspired to be. And then when I did all that and reached all that, you know, then it was what's next, you know what I mean? And then what's next was just to keep partying. And so I ended up being a dope fiend. And so I've OD'd probably 20 times, you know, and that's how I become a high utilizer and a high frequencer of the emergency rooms, because when you're an addict, you're going to get beat up a lot. So my jaw's been broke about 3 or 4 times. My nose has been broke about 4 or 5 times, you know. I made it to the dean's list, and then I got my BA, and then I got my master's. And during this, I created a continuum of care program for one of the most renowned addiction hospitals in Seattle. And I created a program that made it more successful, the most successful in the 75 years of history. I got the Employee of the Year award, and I got 8 or 9 numerous innovation and improvement awards. I created this program and I put it on the internet. And so I started speaking 3 times a week, and it was all over the world. There was people calling in as far away as Romania, Brazil, Hawaii, Alaska. I created small groups in each one of those towns, Anchorage and Fairbanks and Dallas, you know, and I flew to Spokane and Portland, and they never seen anything like that happen before. And then just mind you, 3 or 4 years before that, I was in the penitentiary, you know what I mean? And now I'm making lots of money, wearing suits and all that stuff. You know, the first job started at $12, and when I left, when I got burnt out, I was making $35 an hour, you know, and so, but still I was a kid, and a lot of times now I'm still a kid, and so I'm caught in between these spaces, and I'm trying to find my place in the community, you know, and I know a lot of people are just like that, you know, and they're my age, and their health care is declining because nobody told them the appropriate information that a functional medicine doctor would have told them. You know, we keep going to Western medicine and it's Eastern medicine. And so then that's when you start looking at things through your culture and your history and your legacies and stuff. And so that's where you find your diet at. So now you understand you weren't supposed to be eating that in the first place because your body, you know, and, you know, wow, you guys been feeding this garbage, man, you know, and then, you know, all this stuff. And then now, you know, the nutrition in the ground is not the same nutrition in the ground that it was when my grandfather's was growing stuff. So the nutrition that we're actually getting out of the fruits that you guys are selling us, you know what I mean? If it's a non-GMO, and so you need to know what non-GMO means and what gluten-free means, and the difference between rice and the difference between organics and just, you know, the whole nutritional makeup. So nobody never even told us what was the right things to eat or when to eat and how to eat and what to do and how to speak. And so, you know, because you guys have been stealing from our legacies and stealing from our culture every year. And then you guys send all these service providers into our communities and want us to assimilate. And it's the same equivalency of what you did with the Native Americans when you gave them the blankets with the smallpox on it. You know, how can we get well if we always having to do everything through you, you know, because you don't represent us. You know, and it's not like we're mad at you. We're not mad at you, but we're just telling you that, you know, you need to stop. You know, yeah, you need to stop. You know what I mean? We're woke now. You know what I mean? And that's the whole thing about the Black Lives Matter movement. It should be Black Lives social justice and healthcare matters too. You know, because they don't understand that we need resiliency here, you know, and so that's the reason why we need a reparation so we can balance this out. That's because all these kids that are suffering have no business suffering. You follow what I'm saying? You've taken some pieces of paper and you've turned them into a whole lot of weight that's crushing people. So the Freedom from Trauma series here and its educational platform, I just really embraced it. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing, and I'm really wholeheartedly behind it, more so than any other modality of care, because you can't take advantage of a population that has to pay in order to learn how to play when they was never behind, but the information that you gave us was behind. You follow what I'm saying? You can't charge people to learn how to live, to eat and sleep. You know, you can't heal an individual from anxiety or depression with a pill. You know, these are problems in your homeostasis and your ability to self-regulate between your HPA axis and your limbic brain. They don't tell you that your limbic brain will answer all your questions before it even gets to your prefrontal cortex, because it's a nanosecond behind. You know, and what it's doing is referring to your amygdala, where all your memories are at, you know. And so nobody has taught us about our hippocampus and what it does, and then the gray matter and the white matter, or the corpus calcium, or facial expressions, the return and serve mechanisms. This is profound.
Thank you, Alfred. Thank you so much for your, sharing your journey and sharing all this wisdom with us, your experiences and the work that you're doing and the work that you're offering now. Really appreciate it, and thank you for spending this time with us and demonstrating what's possible with resilience, with awareness, with education, and so we can all be better, healthier and better for it. So I really appreciate your being here. Thank you so much.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
I want to let everybody know that I had an intention of talking about the setup, living with addiction, and what happens to the family when addiction becomes part of it. And I kind of just want to close this out with just one paragraph of this, because this really implies to why this educational foundation is so important. It says that families where addiction is present are oftentimes painful to live in, which is why those who live with addiction may become traumatized to varying degrees by the experience. Broad swings from one end of the emotional, psychological, and behavioral spectrum to the other all too often characterize the addicted family system. Living with addiction can put family members under unusual stress. Normal routines are constantly being interrupted by unexpected or frightening kinds of experiences that are part of living with drug use. What is being said often doesn't match with what family members sense, feel beneath the surface, or see right in front of their eyes. The drug user, as well as family members, may bend, manipulate, and deny reality in their attempt to maintain a family order that they experience is gradually slipping away. The entire system becomes absorbed by a problem that is slowly spinning out of control. Little things become big, and big things get minimized as pain is denied and slipped out sideways. This is an article by Tion Dayton, and it's called The Setup, Living with Addiction. If you want to learn more about the adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed care, and what happens to the family when addiction becomes part of it, you can look us up at the League of Extraordinary People.org, TLEOP.org, for this article, in case you would like to print it out and take it and use it in your family to help you get an understanding about the adverse childhood experiences in living with addiction.
Thank you, Alfred. The link to your website and this resource will be available to everyone. We'll make sure of sharing that. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who watched this episode and stayed with us for this time. to listen to this profound conversation with a lot of guidance that can help us understand why we are the way we are and then do something about it so that we can have the life that we were truly meant to have. So I hope you had some powerful takeaways from this conversation as I have had. And please leave a comment below, your feedback. What did you get from this conversation? And if you have any questions to follow up with Alfred, please leave him a comment. Please reach out to him directly at his at tloep.org, and you'll have all the information being made available to you as well. Thank you again for watching, and Alfred, thank you so much for being here with us. And I hope to continue this conversation with you in the coming days.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.